today, not to bring down the mood, but we would like to cover this one with some pretty severe gravity and give it the justice it deserves, and that is the tragedy of Archie Battersbee. Archie Battersbee was a young boy whose life support was turned off very recently. His mother, Holly Dance, had announced his death outside of Royal London Hospital last Saturday, and she said she was the proudest mum in the world. For those that don't know, he had been declared basically brain dead, and his mother was fighting through the courts to keep her son on life support and alive. And it's one of the flashpoint cases across Britain in the last few years, and there have been two other very prominent ones, which we'll get to soon. And I hate to reach the conclusion prematurely rather, but it seems very much like the state, the judicial system and the medical establishment is letting children down. And so hopefully we can look to some alternatives for that. He'd been in hospital since he was found unconscious at his home in Southend, Essex, in April. He'd never regained consciousness. On June the 13th, doctors at Bart's NHS Trust in London said he had suffered brainstem death, and that his parents' request to relocate him to a hospice to die naturally or even seek care, which didn't seem possible, was impossible and actually reckless, because Archie would have died in transit anyway. And then their case was escalated to the UK High Court, the UK Court of Appeal, the European Court of Human Rights, and even the United Nations, and each time they were shut down. So if we can move on to the Guardian's coverage of this, basically his brain death was a permanent and irreversible loss of brain function. It included the lower part of the brain that connected to the spinal cord and the nervous system, and it meant that his heartbeat, his blood pressure, the movement of his mouth was made impossible, and apparently scans had shown that his brain no longer had any blood flowing through it. So his life support was doing pretty much every function that was possible. There's a quote in this, and Rachel Clark is a palliative care doctor, so she's used to dealing with people at the end of their life. All of this was unbearably harrowing for Archie's parents, but his life support was not withdrawn because his medical team were callous, dogmatic or cruel. Tragically, Archie was a child with no prospect of discovery. So I did just want to include that to make the point that we're not saying that the medical establishment take delight in executing a child or something dark like that. But it might be that the banality of evil, of just overlooking and shrugging because, unlike a parent, you don't have a personal stake in the plight of this child, may have led the judicial system to fail him and denied him the dignity of a natural death, I suppose. So this is why, in the next piece from the Times, his parents have demanded an inquiry into the death. And actually, Christian Concern, who have supported some of these cases with other children as well, have been involved in the legal aid for his parents. They said that they've supported the 12-year-old boy's parents in their 2-month-long legal battle with doctors and released a statement. And they said, there must be an inquiry through the proper channels on what has happened to Archie, and we'll be calling for change. And despite that the mother had said she felt that her son had been deserted by the doctors and the judiciary, and she referred to it as a choreographed execution. She said that, I hope something good can come out of this tragedy and the horrendous experience we have been put through. No parent or family must go through this again. We've been forced to fight a relentless legal battle by the hospital trust while faced with an unimaginable tragedy. We were backed into a corner by the system, stripped of all our rights, and had to fight for Archie's real best interests and a right to live with everything stacked against us. So you can only sympathise, I suppose, with the fact that the tragedy has been worsened by the fact that they had to fight the establishment. Unfortunately, Archie is not the first boy to be failed by the legal system and parts of the NHS. There was obviously the Alfie Evans case from quite a few years ago. I don't know if you were familiar with this at the time.
I struggle with these stories. I'm coming at this almost blind because I strongly believe in the sanctity of life and that every human life is sacred, and I channel that through fighting against abortion. When these stories come up about these young children that are dying, I try to honestly avoid them as much as possible because it weighs too heavily on my soul. I'm not very good at dealing with them. But I've taken a brief look through the story of Archie just because we're talking about it today, and I think they're always difficult. There's always a lot of nuance, but I think generally speaking, I always have to come down on the side of life.
I've come down on, and we'll see legal efforts to do this in a bit, but I've always come down on, rather than ensuring the child dies at the whim of, and I'm not saying it's flippant, but the decree of a judge or a doctor, you should allow the child to, live until the parents, if the parents wishes to allow their child to fight until they pass naturally.
Well, a lot of that comes back to what we were saying earlier, in that the state has replaced the parent.
Yeah. That's unfortunately, and that we'll get onto a quote about that towards the end, which is, I don't wish to make light of it, but there is a strange idea that's captured a lot of institutions and they believe they could supplant parenthood. So this is Alfie Evans. He was born to Tom Evans and Kate James in Merseyside on the 9th of May 2016. He was admitted to Alder Hayes Children's Hospital in Liverpool in December 2016 after he had seizures, and he remained a patient in the hospital until his death. His parents said they wanted to fly into a hospital in Italy, but this was blocked by Alder Hay, the NHS Trust, who said continuing treatment was not in Alfie's best interests. They went to a high court to seek a declaration that continued ventilator support is not in Alfie's best interests, and in the circumstances, it is not lawful that such treatment continue. The 1989 Children's Act said that where the child's risk of life where the child's life is at risk, the state can and should intervene. And so they're trying to say essentially that the parents are being irresponsible in not letting him die immediately and dragging it out, which I don't think is fair. But so on the 20th of February, Justice Hayden said the doctors could stop providing life support for Alfie against his parents' wishes, so that the child could get the required peace, quiet, and privacy to die. Mr. Evans said he believed his son was still responsive, but one of the hospital doctors said one of the problems is that Alfie's parents looked at him and said that he was breathing and feeding and moving, but they said that the only movements he had was because he was having spontaneous seizures prompted by touching, which it might be medically true, but all I could imagine is, okay, what if you were wrong, unfortunately. So then they went to the Supreme Court of Appeal, the ECHR, all with the assistance of Christian Concern, much like Archie Battersbee's case.
Yeah, Andrea and the team at Christian Concern are absolutely fantastic, and they're really doing God's work. They are.
Well, I've seen them also debate plenty of other issues, like, for example, I know Mark Dolan's had them on to talk about the perniciousness of pornography, for example, and they are definitely doing all they can to defend the sanctity and life of children. So even if you are skeptical of faith, it's wonderful that people care passionately enough and have the conviction to do this for kids. Then the Italian Foreign Ministry actually granted Alfie citizenship and said he could have an immediate transfer to Italy to go to a hospital that was linked to the Vatican. The Pope also blessed that. Pope Francis, one of the good things he's actually done. He said, I renew my appeal that the suffering of his parents may be heard and that their desire to seek new forms of treatment may be granted. But this was dismissed by the judge, who said Alfie's a British citizen and therefore falls under the jurisdiction of the High Court. And so he died on the 28th of April 2018,
Awful.
Only aged a year and 11 months.
It was similar with baby Charlie, wasn't it? That Trump gave him the right to go over to America, and he was offered American treatment, but the Brits said no.
Yeah, exactly the same. I was putting that in the next piece.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, don't apologise. This is where a lot of these stories add up, and we're starting to see a pattern here, unfortunately. Charlie was born on the 4th of August 2016. He had a rare medical condition which gave him severe brain damage, limb paralysis, and the inability to breathe without a ventilator. Great Ormond Street Hospital said the moment he was diagnosed, his prognosis was bleak. Connie Yates and Chris Godd, Charlie's parents, they wanted to have Charlie moved to America to have essentially Trump's right to try policy, nucleoside bypass therapy. The US hospital offered him the treatment, and they'd actually raised in crowdfunding $1.3 million in funds to take him there. So it was all paid for.
All that money.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's wonderful that so many people were willing to donate, and it was all paid for. It was within the legal framework of the US. They were willing to attempt the transfer rather than have him certainly die. Unfortunately, the High Court again intervened. So did the Supreme Court and the European Court, and they all agreed with the doctors and said it would be irresponsible to move him. He can't even try to stay alive. We're just going to guarantee he dies rather than he might die in transit. And so he died on the 28th of July in 2017, 11 months and 24 days after the court ordered his life support be switched off. Now, the dark side of this, in the next article, is that Charlie Gard and Alfie Evans' cases alone cost the NHS £400,000 in legal fees. So they spent all of that money to ensure that children's life support was turned off. And I can't help but feel that might have been a calculation that the treatment might have been more expensive than just paying for all the legal fees. And that is,
I hope not,
harrowing. No, I'd hope not as well. But when the state sees its role as superseding the interests of the parents, and also has material concerns at stake with healthcare, with the judicial system, etc., it does raise the spectre of a concerning calculus that might disregard right to life.
But in Charlie's case, they raised that £1.3 million. So it's wicked to deny them a chance to try it.
Exactly. I'd agree. And this is why well, my concern, as you said, the state superseding the parents. If we go to the next one, it's not directly linked, but there is something telling when Biden's education secretary, for example, said parents shouldn't be the primary stakeholder in their kids' education.
Who should be?
Exactly.
What? A parent's primary job is to educate their kids, to bring up their kids.
Yeah. And they have the most invested in the well-being of that child. As soon as you offload them to the state, apathy can set in and the kids can suffer. And so it's very concerning when this is the idea that's permeated these institutions that are meant to be intervening on behalf of kids' well-being, but may not have their best interests at heart.
This is what I saw in schools all the time as a teacher. The teachers thought they knew best for the kids. They thought they knew better than the parents. They didn't want the kids to go home and get indoctrinated by their bigoted parents, so they imparted their personal values onto the kids themselves. It's like, that's not what you're there to do. You're there to teach science. You're there to teach maths. You're there to impart knowledge. You're not there to pass on values, because who's to say your values are better than their parents' values? It's the audacity of it.
The same as the quality of life question. It's, oh, okay, well, you're going to have a poor quality of life at home, so therefore we'll just switch your life support off. And I would never think to speak on behalf of a child and their family as to whether or not they're going to have a poor quality of life just because they've got a disability.
Who's to judge the quality of their life?
Exactly. So for a lot of these harrowing stories, I would say that parents should have the last say in the healthcare and lifespan of their terminally ill children. There's a piece in the Mail that says we've got to find a better way of handling these tragic cases. And something has come up. If we can go on to the next link, please, John. Well, first of all, Jeremy Hunt has actually showed a rare bit of humanity. Wow. He said, over the weekend, I raised the cases of Alfie and Archie. The writer said he raised the cases of Alfie and Archie with Jeremy Hunt, who has said that now, as the Commons Health Select Committee head, such cases represented the worst of NHS paternalism, and he will be asking his colleagues to consider whether we should look at this as part of a future inquiry. There's also the idea of Charlie's Law that's been supported by the parents of Charlie Gard has been proposed.
The politicians get on my blooming nerves. I should ask my colleagues whether we should be asking whether we should be looking at... No, just look into it. Just sort it out.
Yeah, kick the can down the road. Meanwhile, more children could be affected like this, which is inexcusable. It would basically allow that parents would have the final say in such extreme cases where their kids are terminally ill and they want to take them abroad to try and save their life. So Charlie's Law sounds like a great measure in correcting some of this, but the dark underbelly of this is, as we've seen, as you said before in the prior segment about online grooming and things like this. Children are being subjected to a lot of things, including social media. And while the online harms bill is not the way to tackle it, but the dark secret is, and we have to say allegedly here, because apparently TikTok has been on Alfie's mother's case about this because they're saying it doesn't exist. But if we go to the next piece, apparently Archie's mother has alleged that he was trying to do a blackout challenge on TikTok.
Okay.
So he constricted the blood flow around his neck to try and make himself pass out on camera.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what caused him to never wake up. And so she says, TikTok is responsible in part for not...
TikTok is evil. TikTok is the Chinese communists subverting our culture, but TikTok is not responsible. Parents are responsible.
I agree.
I'm sorry. Parents need to stop giving their children access to the internet that is unfiltered without supervision. And that means games consoles, smartphones, tablets, laptops. They're not there to babysit your child because they are indoctrinating your children with evil.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say definitely that TikTok should not be hosting physical harm on their platform and allowing children from 13 on here.
And that's the purpose of TikTok. The whole point of TikTok is to undermine our way of life. As you well know, the Chinese version of the app is very wholesome. It has time limits, so you can't just keep scrolling indefinitely and get that dopamine hit. It teaches you about home improvement and personal improvement and academic improvement, whereas TikTok is all about scantily clad women twerking or, sexualizing young girls or dangerous trends to follow. And it's all about pushing the woke narrative around gender theory, queer theory, and critical race theory. It is literally an app designed to subvert our culture. And we're letting young kids scroll through it for hours on end every day.
Yeah, it's destabilizing the identities of children and also putting them at physical risk with things like the socket challenge, where children electrocute themselves, the salt and ice challenge to burn themselves like it's Fight Club, the nutmeg challenge involving taking lethal amounts of nutmeg, and the antihistamine challenge where you take loads of pills to induce cardiac arrest.
The Chinese are laughing at us. Yeah. You don't need an old-fashioned war anymore.
No.
You just let the enemy kill itself.
Yeah, it's fifth generational warfare. Exactly. TikTok says, these dangerous trends are never on our platform, and they remove any content which promotes dangerous behavior.
And could cause harm. Right. So let's get to that, because what TikTok do remove is content that would cause harm to in the reverse. So anything I put on TikTok gets removed.
Yeah.
Anytime I say, look, a man has an XY chromosome, or a man is an adult human male, or a woman is an adult human female, or say anything that they would perceive as non-woke, it gets taken down. But woke stuff gets promoted. These trends get promoted. Sexual degeneracy gets promoted. So it's actually a nonsense that remove any content that promotes dangerous behavior or could cause harm.
Yeah.
It's their definition of harm that is wrong.
Yeah. So if we just go on to the final piece, TikTok's being sued actively by other parents who have lost children to the Blackout Challenge. Lalani from Temple, Texas, died on the 15th of July 2021. Police determined her death was a direct result of attempting TikTok's Blackout Challenge. TikTok was also sued in May by the family of a 10-year-old Nyla Anderson, who died last December after reportedly attempting the same challenge. So, as we said, we're not going to be cruel to Holly Dance by saying, lessons learned too late, don't allow your children on these platforms. But until, for example,
other parents can take notes.
Yeah, exactly. And until, for example, incumbent Prime Minister Liz Truss possibly makes good on her pledge to ban TikTok, don't let your kids near this nonsense.
Yeah. Well, Trump was going to ban it, wasn't it? That was a great idea.
It was.
And I know I mentioned that I've got an account on there, but all I try to do is try to add some balance.
Yeah, subvert the subverters.
Yeah, I promote my GB News content on there. I don't create anything new for TikTok. But also there's the worry that actually they're data mining us as well. If you install the app on your phone, the Chinese are grabbing all of your information.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. It's a national security risk. So while we sympathise with the parents, more, of course, must be done. At this point, Charlie's Law seems like the most sensible way to give parents the right over whether their children live or die, whether they have the right to try to fight a terminal illness. And also, it seems like TikTok as an instrument of subversion, there is no salvaging it. We endorse parents taking their children off the platform and ultimately the platform being excoriated from the West entirely.
Thanks for watching this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. If you enjoyed that and want more, you can subscribe on our website and become a premium member where you can access our exclusive content and all the other content that we put out, such as this recent video where Carl's talking about why aren't free speech arguments persuasive. If you're interested in following Carl on social media, you can follow him on Getter @CarlBenjamin. Thank you and goodbye.